What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Rideshare Rodeo, gig economy news and interviews, sponsored by Para and ParaWorks. I'm your host, SJ. It's time to get it on.
Well, midnight headlight, blinding on a rainy night, steep grade up ahead, slowing down and making no time. I gotta keep it rolling. Those are windshield wipers slapping out the tempo, breaking from the rhythm with the song on the radio. I gotta keep it rolling. I'm driving my life away.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Rideshare Rodeo. Back again for another week, you guys. You're going to have to deal with my raspy voice. It's starting to come back, but yeah, we'll pull it off today, right? Yeah. And I've been kind of letting it rest a little bit when I can, so I hope everybody's well. I'm going to jump in today with... So I talked about this a little bit last week, not here on the podcast, but on a different piece, and I really wanted to talk about it a little more. So... if you've already seen this story, that's okay. But I'm curious because a lot of people, when I tell this, a lot of people might go, well, we've heard that story so many times. But I think it's time to touch on some things here. So, this delivery agent, obviously Dasher, accused of attempted rape and murder, DoorDash faces scrutiny. It's a horrible story. And the DoorDasher who attempted to rape and murder the person did have a record that Checker nor DoorDash nor anybody caught. They had been 2 times arrested and in prison. So here's the thing, though. Again, this is one of those stories where I really need to go to a point that we talked about recently, because I hate that when it says DoorDash agent accused or DoorDash dasher or DoorDash driver accused of attempted rape and murder, because here's the thing. There is an equal number let's start with rideshare. There's an equal number of people who do rideshare, okay, that are either driving or passengers that commit harm to the driver or the passenger. It used to feel like it was leaning very much to most things happen to the passengers and it was the rideshare drivers. But as of late, it's right at about 50-50. I mean, as often as something that a driver does something, a passenger does something. So it's really kind of balanced out. And the odd part of this, the oddest part to me, is that it's carried over to the food space as well, because even in DoorDash, we see that, and here it's not as quite as equal, because here in the food delivery space, we don't have as many people dropping food off committing crimes, but we have a lot of people committing crimes on people delivering food, whether it be that they've been set up and they're gonna have their car stolen, or, they were told to go to here. And, we've heard about the dismembered people, the person in Florida, and then just, a lot of these sexual allegation type things too. These are much more customer based. So when you hear about delivery agent accused of attempted rape and murder, I guess my thing is just leave the delivery driver or the customer part out, because really it happens on the delivery side. It happens much more from the customers. So why scarn that? So here's my thing about that, though. I do agree with the story, though, because DoorDash and their treatment of this is horrible. I wouldn't expect any different. However, I mean, it needs to be said, guys. I mean, I think we all know, we've all had our run-ins with the apps. I don't know how many people have worked DoorDash that are listening. I've worked all the apps. I've put my time in with DoorDash. It was just never, for me anyway. It was never. I don't know. I know that most people use it as their primary app. For me, it never. I never even wanted it to be. Maybe it never was as many bangers, but in my market. But I do know that people do well in my market with it. However, most of the people that do well in my market with it, multi-app with a ton of apps, and I don't think that they even. Most of the people I know don't even count on like more than half of that being from DoorDash. Whereas a lot of markets and a lot of people I talk to, it is usually, if they do DoorDash, they can hate DoorDash all they want, but all the people I talk to, all the drivers around the country who multi-app, outside of like my market, I honestly believe that most of them do more than half of their income comes from DoorDash. And so that's a big part of your, I mean, that's a big part of it. Because if you were to, for most people, if you take half their income away, this wouldn't be a doable thing. So obviously, half of your income is allowing you to be in this gig economy. So, DoorDash, we thought it was in the in the low millions, but millions of dashers. Tony Shu went on the rideshare guy and told Harry that no, that it's 13 million drivers. Okay, but they might not be active, and I don't know what they use for active. I know that most people who stop working the platform don't call and say, "Hey, by the way, deactivate me." They don't go through all those steps. I think they leave it. Either they forget, they just don't care. They're like, whatever, that'll just go out next time they need something, whatever. Or they just are like, I'll leave it on, whatever. But I just don't think that people take the time to do that. It's like when we ask somebody to write a senator. I mean, it's like you have to go. It's like you have to go to the dentist to have teeth pulled. And I mean, I get it. None of us are like. It's like I can even picture sitting, my house going, oh, but what? I gotta write it or I gotta type it. What? Then what? Do I just email it or I'm gonna mail this? I gotta have a stamp. Wait, do I even have current stamps? It's like, we live in such a digital age, and I know you could email them as well, but there's something about a stamped envelope when you're emailing or when you're trying to contact representatives, and I don't know. But even the emails, it's like pulling teeth. It's like just email them, and just nobody wants to, But we all have to remember that the people who want to be employees or at least want to drop a grenade in these apps for the rest of us, they are writing their congressman. That's where the pain comes in. Because if we're not writing our congressman, then if they are, again, we pointed this out around the town hall, that then these elected officials are actually not as dumb as some of us make jokes about sometimes, but they're very uninformed on so many issues. I mean, I've recently tried to like really take in all this, and I can only imagine how hard it is to be an amazing politician, because you do need to. I mean, to be an amazing politician, and again, guys, I don't think there are many of them, but you have to be on top of all of the topics and all of the subject matter that's going to be coming on. And you have to be not just familiar, but really understand. And I feel like a lot of people, and I just keep learning more and more about this, a lot of people are just elected officials who have one or two, maybe three things that they're really going after. And then while they're there, they kind of rely on their staffers and their assistants and stuff to tell them, oh, this bill's about this, this, and this. All of your supporters, they all want this. So you'll kind of just like, well, that's not one of my big projects. Oh, that's fine. I'll just vote how they want. That's not good. Your constituents carry a voice, but you need to be deciphering that voice, reading the actual legislation, understanding it inside and out, asking questions if you have them, but then you're representing those people. So there's parts that people don't know. So to that, I would say, if we've elected somebody, you take it back to your constituents, or you make them, you make it understood why something would be bad or whatever, but if I guess there's too many. I guess what I'm trying to get at is there's too many politicians who are very, very focused, and I'm glad they are on the things they really care about. But I've seen this a lot more lately. 2, 3, 4 things that they really want to tackle and sink their teeth into, and they know it inside and out. But when it comes to like the broad scope, they really don't have much understanding of so many situations. Yet these people they have to vote on our behalf. So they're voting on bills, but really they were elected because they are pushing, to end homelessness or green energy or that kind of stuff. Let's say that they're affected or they're elected by that, but now they have to vote on employment stuff and things like that, where maybe they were like, that's not really, I'll just go with the flow kind of thing. No, we don't want you to go with the flow. The flow is always just bad advice that you're getting from people who are emailing and writing your office. That's why I always say it. I hope that some of you do it, I mean, if all of us just took a minute to send an email saying, hey, enough, knock this off. Yeah, I mean, that would really actually do something. So I'm only laughing because, I mean, like, I'm just thinking how hard it is to get everybody to do something like that. But at the same time, I was thinking about, honestly, how powerful that would be. Think if half of the gig workers out there right now, either today or tomorrow, emailed their congressman. Do you know how much overload that would be? Do you know how much like impact that would have? So yeah, I guess I just say that because we're coming into another election cycle here. There's some weird things, but I guess back to the DoorDash thing here real quick. So why I think this is super important though. It's not just about taking the DoorDasher or the customer out of the equation in the clickbait title. It's about DoorDash stating that we're independent contractors, but going that extra mile too. Like, it's like they actually made a comment on this when really the person who did this should have never been on the platform. But they went as far as to say, well, they're independent contractors. That's, it's up to you which ones you. Come on, like. As much as I hate it, I'd be better with no comment. I mean, don't just come out and be rude and double down on like how little you care about a human being. That's just ridiculous. I really don't know what else to say about it. This is not, and this kind of stuff is not, by the way, it's not helping DoorDash. It's not helping these companies to like keep showing how little they care about people. Whether they think they're winning or not, or whether whatever we all think, like, oh, the app keeps changing and hurting. To be honest, like, this is bad for all of us for them to continue this. Because, I mean, it can only lead to either worse treatment of workers, more legislation, more government taxing of their money, of the company's money, which we all know they'll take out on the drivers. They will find a way. So while I understand that legislation is happening in every state, this is why I say we all need to be involved right now, because it is happening in every state. It's at least being looked at now on a very, very, very real level in every single state. I'm talking about the reddest states. I got to tell you guys, because without the PRO Act, even the reddest of states want this to get somewhat resolved, okay? Because they're sick of this crap. They're sick of this coming up every other week or every week and being an issue and all the lawsuits. They would love a definition to the gig economy. Now, if each state has to do it, they'll do it, and a red state will treat it different than a blue state different than a purple state. They might all be in somewhat succinct, but I mean, they're all going to be differing laws, and it's going to be a little confusing. That said, while I'm on the DoorDash thing, and then I want to move into this Minneapolis thing, but while I'm on the DoorDash thing, Wisconsin, talking about regulations, Wisconsin is actually pushing for some regulation that I don't think anybody would be opposed to. If you are, please leave it in the comments. I'd love to see why you'd be opposed to it, because it's basically just, not only is it transparency, but it's being transparent coming out of the gate. So basically, if like DoorDash or whoever wants to work with a person, they have to get the written permission of the restaurant that it's okay to work with them. And I understand that. And for those that, I have had a lot of people say, but that's just going to make the restaurant more money. Yeah, I get it. But I've also ran a restaurant before. So sometimes you're only equipped to handle the weekend that you have in front of you with food to your Monday delivery or something like that. Like, you don't on Friday night want to run out of everything because DoorDash went off. And I know you could start setting your pars higher and bringing in more food, but maybe you don't have the storage space. Maybe you're not looking to be on that scale. Maybe you don't like your food arriving cold from your restaurant to the door, because people know what to expect when they come to your restaurant. Well, so yeah, I would say that they have every right to. And with the law that they're trying to put in place in Wisconsin, it also says that they need to know exact times, when it was ordered, when it'll be delivered, all of this, because again, it goes back to what I was saying. These restaurants, some of them have a very good name for themselves. And I think that they're fed up with like their food going out through all these third parties and then getting somewhere and being thrown in the dirt outside of somebody's house, and it's cold and everything. Even though the person knows what to expect when they go get this food, it's not as good. So even if they understand that, like, well, of course it's it's to go, so it's not going to be as good. In their brain somewhere, it's registering like, that wasn't as good as last time. Well, maybe the last time they went in there, maybe there's a reason why. Maybe it's not financial, why the restaurant itself doesn't have a delivery person. Some restaurants don't like to do that. I know the pandemic changed a lot of that for a lot of restaurants and made almost all restaurants want to go that route. But to be honest, that's up to the restaurant. This is their business. So if they don't want to do takeout, they don't have to. If they want to, they can make a deal with these companies. But these companies need to stop allowing 4 kitchens to run out of one as 3 ghost kitchens in a location. They need to stop doing, like, saying, hey, you want to be on our platform? The restaurant's like, no. Then they put them on the platform anyway. I don't know. I grew up in a different era, but this is this is very clearly not how business is done. I don't think. I know it's still all being figured out, and I know that people are thinking, well, if it's not how business is done, then then it wouldn't be done this way. But that's incorrect, because their business models are being challenged everywhere right now. I know that people always think that it's, all these other things that are causing nonprofit. Really, it's the fact that they're okay with their churn rate, of having a driver for 2 weeks or having 10 for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, 1 stays, 9 go, but then a new 9 come in. That's horrible service. First of all, at the best places that like I go in Denver, like bars and stuff, I go places where the staff has been there for 10 years or 5+ years. I don't. If there's a place where every week all the staff is turning over, usually that's not going to be a regular spot. So I don't know. I guess my thing is, each business deserves the right to tell DoorDash yes or no. It's not DoorDash's decision to decide, well, tough, we're going to serve your food anyway. It's just not. It's I don't know. I know that there can be a case on either side of that, but at the same time, I think with the size of these platforms, they need deals. They are both companies. Companies make deals together on a B2B level. That never happened with this. All right, guys, before I jump into this other, the Minneapolis thing, and then see how long my voice goes today, I did want to mention that there's a thing in called the Salem Skipper. It's in Salem, Massachusetts. That it's rideshare that takes you around town for just $2. Okay, I know it doesn't. It sounds odd. I don't know if you guys remember we had free cab on the podcast. Um, Uber and Lyft are doing a thing now where they're trying to kind of do what free cab was going to do, of doing advertising to reduce cost, or at least advertising in app while you're using the app, so that they've never done this. Maybe that'll bring down the cost, but the Salem Skipper is something that sounds very interesting. I've read a couple things on them. But the other thing I wanted to get into, and before Minneapolis, was the Uber record button. We've talked about this on this podcast so many times. I would need to go back. I'm guessing it's like in the double digits. Was like the first time, maybe not. Was like the first time we talked about this though. It has come twice around. Both times it went to like 5 test cities. And it seemed like it was going to fully launch both times. But I always kind of wondered, like, well, what are you doing about privacy laws? Because unless you're in a two-party consent state to record, you can't use a recording unless both parties consent to it. So it would go to the test cities, then it was gone. Then it would go to the test cities, then it was gone. Well, now they're going to launch it nationwide. So Uber is going to go nationwide with the record button so that a passenger or a driver can hit record and record the trip. Now, I'm for that for the safety reasons. I think it's so late in the game that it's almost like, why? I feel like, again, I tell you guys this all the time. I feel like this is just PR. It's all this is. And watching, then it'll fail. Then they'll say they're done with it, and then it'll come back around again. But this time it's being already addressed by a few states because it violates privacy law. So, I mean, that's a no-brainer. We all saw that. I don't know why they would have thought that they would get away with that, but it violates privacy law. So why on earth would why on earth would you launch this in states where you know it's going to be a legal battle? Look, I mean, we can talk about driver pay being low because of this, that, the other, but let's not forget that, like, it really, in a good business model, it should come down to just, hey, price the things outright so that everybody can make some money along the way. Well, I mean, we already know that in every state they have 500 lawyers going at it all the time. This is getting very expensive, and I guarantee you, just like everything with these, that it's coming out of our end. We, the drivers, are paying for all this crap. So when you see all these junk articles, and I say that because I re-aggregate them on RideshareRodeo.com, UberLiftDrivers.com. So I re-aggregate all this there, but I mean, like, that's why it's so helpful, that website, to me too, because it's a great tool for me to go see, okay, Uber record button, see how many times it comes up on the search and where on the timeline, because it's pretty funny to see, like, for how many years they've been doing this. It's just a joke. It's a simple it's not even like a tough add to the app for a team like that. They could just do it. So clearly they know it's a legal problem, but now they're just going to do it again. My guess is as soon as it gets enough buzz for them, they'll remove it from some states and keep it in others. And we all know how it goes. Good old Uncle Uber. So, okay, let's get on to this Minneapolis thing. So let's go a little bit back in time. So if you guys remember, we were talking about this not too long ago, right? So the governor of, the drivers of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. So Minneapolis and St. Paul make up most of the population of Minnesota. If you're not familiar with the state, really, like, a lot of it's very, very rural. But Minneapolis, St. Paul is like their core population by far. I mean, almost the entire state is the population comes from there. So they were really pushing to have this Seattle model. And, The Seattle model seems to be working in Seattle. I guess only time will tell, really. I know it's been around for a while, but still new. Um, but one of my questions becomes, if we get too many Seattle models, how does the company pay for things, or how do they ever expect to get to profitability when they're already fighting to get there now? At the same time, I see why if they can't get, I could argue if they can't get there in this many years, why would they be getting to profitability anyway? So I don't know if that's been like a tool that they've used. Like, we're not even profitable. We shouldn't be talking about this yet. But, obviously, clearly they fight all this legislation. The people in California who I listen to and who I talk to, like, Sergio from the Rideshare Guy and a handful of other people who I'm really listening to, they live in California and they look at the Seattle model as a good idea. So they even see that AB5 destroyed lives. Now, again, AB5 was not gig related, so don't huff and puff on me here. If you're a fan of Prop 22 and you live in California, well, more power to you. It's just to those of us looking in from the outside, it looks very problematic. Like if Prop 22 was in everybody's state, would you accept extra money from these companies? Of course you would. But it came at the expense of killing off careers and other things that probably the whole thing shouldn't have happened. But now everybody's not happy with Prop 22 and they all want this redrafted, and it can't be. So it's this whole like, well, this is the agreement, guys, and it's now they're not happy enough. And I have a feeling that's where a lot of this goes. The Seattle model is an exact, it has like whatever it is, $1.40 a mile and 25 cents a minute while active doing rideshare or whatever. And then outside of Seattle and the rest of the state of Washington, I believe it's like 20 cents less a mile and maybe 20 or 25 cents a minute still. But that's all well and good. And I know that the agreement was made with the city of Seattle. We know that union delegates were there. However, it's not a union thing yet. But we know they were there because, A, there were union delegates there, but the Teamsters were also there. I can tell you guys, if you don't already know, the Teamsters don't go places for free. They don't go just for the free lunch and to see what's going on and listen. If the Teamsters go to a building, it's because they're involved in something. If they stay in that building like during the session and are part of the vote, it's because they are already laying some groundwork. And so that becomes a very big concern of mine. I'm not against unions, but I just have always said I don't think they belong in the gig economy. I do think we need solutions. We need definitions. We need things quickly because new legislation is coming around. And as we've talked about before, the administration is such a mess that when the new on October 1st, when the new rule change goes into effect, this current administration is just saying we don't care if Julie Sue's nominated. She will be making all the decisions, blah blah blah. So the administration's already breaking how things are done in Washington. They're like, no, that's not. We're going to do it this way, and we don't care that she can't get elected. We're gonna just keep her in there. So that's very scary as it is. We need definition in this gig economy, or they'll be able to flip this quicker than the other independent contractors. They'll be able to turn this into some disaster, trust me. Even if it comes just through taxation to the companies. Because here we are, Minneapolis went to vote, took a while. It was one of those ugly things, too, where they attached it to another bill that needed to pass. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this happening, but sometimes there's a bill that the entire state, let's say, understands needs to pass. Both sides of the aisle, no matter where you sit, it's like some state related to your state, and everybody knows it needs to pass. It's one of those things that'll pass by 90%. Then they take a bill like this and they attach it to it. And to make that pass, you need to make the other bill pass. I don't like that. I think that there's never a time for that. And if there is, it should only be when it's completely 100% relevant to the bill it's attached to. There should never be an attached bill like, hey, this is to make sure that we have heat this winter, But also, let's talk about rideshare pay, and we'll just make it the same bill. No, that's not the same bill. And that's the kind of stuff that all of the regular people in this country know is just trickery. So stop doing it. But anyway, they finally got both sides of the aisle. They finally kicked this thing through. This is this is about a month and a half ago, probably. And they got, they got the everything. Everybody was on board, and the what's his name? Tim Walz, the governor of the state. He vetoed the bill. Now, normally he votes with the party or with the recommendations. He is a governor who has never vetoed in his life, in his career. This was the first veto of his career. And honestly, I don't even know if it was one he wanted to veto. He said he wanted more stuff looked into, but we have to wonder how much of this is actually his affiliation with these companies. But now they're trying to go around the governor, and not for the entire state, but for Minneapolis, they're trying to make it so that drivers would get a pay bump and all this. And basically, it took a lot to even get that voted on. And then the session was ending. It did get the vote. And then the veto happened. And that's just what happens. That's just politics. Things happen. But now they're trying to go around him. And here's Uber's response anyway, as of today. So now, because they say that they're going to go for what they initially wanted for the state, at least for Minneapolis. I don't know if it's for the Twin Cities. I keep seeing wants Minneapolis City Council. I don't know if that means the Twin Cities or not. We got Gigan and a couple other people who live up there that probably get back to me and let me know. But I don't know if Minneapolis City Council is also speaks on behalf of the Twin Cities. I'm not sure. But so Uber says this new Minneapolis law could drive up prices or even drive them out of the city. And this is what they had said before. And let's not forget, this is what they did in California to get the vote and to have Prop 22 put on the ballot. So are they bluffing? I don't think so. I mean, all it would take is one city to go, yeah, you won't leave, and to like pull the trigger here, and if they didn't leave, they would never have any clout again to say, hey, we'll leave. So I honestly believe they would leave. But the ordinance would give drivers a pay bump, but Uber says, but the rideshare driver or giant wants the Minneapolis City Council to pump the brakes. Of course they do. But the city council is the one who is trying to go around the governor. So Uber sent out an email to customers. So if you have an account with Uber and you don't drive with them, but you use Uber in the Twin Cities, you got an email that said, if this bill were to pass, we would unfortunately have no choice but to greatly reduce service and possibly shut down operations entirely. So would they? I believe they would. I have no reason to think that they wouldn't. But the other thing is that, okay, even if they didn't shut it down and they simply just decided, okay, we're going to super shrink business, but rides are going to go through the roof in cost. I'm not really sure what the city is expecting. Maybe this is a good city for testing out if cabs would make a comeback. I honestly don't know. Personally, I don't think cabs will make that comeback. I think the taxi industry missed a huge portal. When Uber started, they needed to create a universal app, like for yellow cabs, so that you could land in any given city and you had the app. Because as it is, you have to land in a city, find out what their cabs are, and then use the app. And that led to a plague of issues where cities we've seen have tried to move their transit systems onto Uber. It happened here in Denver. You could buy your train tickets. You could buy bus tickets. All it did was teach Uber everything about your logistics. That's all it did. Because in all these cities, San Antonio, all these cities that had these like Uber getting into the metro stuff and all in transportation, they learned a lot. They took away the ups and downs of the city. They got access to this, and then they kind of just bounced, which is kind of what you'd expect. So there needed to be a universal taxi app. That would have helped. I believe the cities really did a crappy job, even to this day, rolling out an app that would compete. Why don't they have an app in the city that says, hey, here's how you get your train. Here's how you get your bus. And you can get a taxi or an Uber, and you could even compare the three prices in there at that time. Why wouldn't they want to do that? They needed to reverse engineer the idea that Uber brought to them and said, hey, we'll take over your city and we'll straighten it out and we'll do all this, that, and the other. Just false Uber promises, balloon promises, and then bounce on them. Why didn't they just reverse engineer and say, listen, we will let our app send out to you guys. And if Uber were to say no, then they'll say, fine, we'll just go with Lyft then. Lyft and Yellow Cab. Or whatever other cabs you have too. Like in our city, we have 3. Fine, we'll just use the 3 taxis and Lyft. There's still leverage there. I don't know. I guess I'm pointing it out because on so many levels, we don't have the voice to fight this. We do have a voice. But as I think I learned with the town hall and with other things, our voice, the best use of our voice is to get it into the ears of the people who are making legislation. Like turning your app off at the airport and staging a 10-person strike. We've seen this before. It doesn't do anything. You can't strike a platform because all that is taking a day off. That's not striking. A strike is only worth a damn if everybody were to strike, and you're never going to get anybody on the gig apps to strike. In a unified way, never. We can get them to not take crap orders while we try and get into the legislators here, because the companies have proven themselves. If this hasn't become so apparent to everybody, obviously we need to go back a couple chapters and get into some of this again, because if it hasn't sunk in by now that these companies are not ever going to be, okay, let's do this for the drivers. They are to a point where it's like, okay, how can we lowball this and what agreement can we come to? But that's involving legislators. So we need those legislators to be very aggressively informed. Otherwise, they can't represent us properly. Because if they don't understand fully, inside and outside, what is going on with these things, they cannot vote on our behalf. But I feel like the Minneapolis thing is not a threat. I feel like if they do find a way to go around the governor's veto and actually push this through at the same rates, pretty much, I don't have it in front of me, but they were pretty much the same as what Seattle did. The cost of living in Seattle is way beyond Minneapolis. So where they came up with these numbers, I think that was the only thing I kind of saw in the governor's veto, was that he was like, let's do a little more math on this and do a little more investigating, because it did seem, I got to say, I'm all for the drivers getting paid more. That's my thing, and I want to advocate. I just want to advocate correctly. I don't want to be one of the people going, let's strike, because they don't work. They don't work, and they especially don't work in a virtual environment. You can't sit at home and strike. You can't just go take some signs down to wherever, if you're going to strike at the airport, or if you're going to go to the Capitol, or whatever you're going to do. It doesn't help when you only have 15, 20 people show, and there's not even a hiccup on the platform. And by that, I mean not even a hiccup. Nobody notices that you're not there. That's pretty sad. it goes to show how bad they oversaturate the market. But again, I think that this is proof that we need to get into the legislators here. Now, you guys know me. I don't want legislation. Never have. Never will. However, I'm going to have to will and find a way, because the companies are never going to change, but they will come to the table and make some final decisions, because they realize that it's almost to like game over, enough screwing around. And I think they know that. You know, they've played screwing around enough that they see some things coming down the pipe that are pretty bad. That could very much hurt their business even more than they already do. I mean, let's be honest. Dispatch car services are not notoriously known for being the way to become a billionaire. So, and I don't mean us, the drivers. I mean, it's not a good investment for many people. I think we've learned that over time. Transportation's just not in general. There was a time, maybe the airline industry, but otherwise, no. We've even learned from rail. We've learned from cars. It's never going to bring the profits you want. But the investors are there, and it is publicly traded now. So now my view is, I don't want legislation. I know you guys don't, but let's play ball here and make sure that at least that we come out of it with some decent legislation, instead of like just going, man, I really don't want that. I really don't want that. Let me keep taking these crappy orders, and I'll just hope that for the best, and then not being informed and find out in our state that we're now under these new terms that none of us want to do. So with that said, you guys, that's a wrap for this week's podcast. Don't forget that on Friday, I always drop the round table. And by next week, I'll have my voice back. As you can hear, it's probably going a little hoarse right now, too. Not really sure what's happened with it, but somehow lost the voice a little bit. But that's okay. We'll see you back here on Friday, and see you back here next week. Got some guests and stuff coming up, too. But I will save it all for next week, you guys. And with that said, you go out there and earn smart, be safe, and be good to one another. Peace.